What is up, my beautiful gemstones? Welcome back to my channel, and if you're new here, thanks for checking us out. My name is GemmaJade, but today we are going to be discussing the haunted Sallie house. We've covered many haunted houses and so-called demon houses here on this channel in the several years I've been on here discussing these things with you all, but today is something altogether different, even though it might sound the same. You see, there are haunted houses, and then there's the Sallie house. Located in Atchison, Kansas, the Sallie house has so much and such incredible paranormal activity that many people have named it the most haunted house in the entire United States. The house was built sometimes in the 1800s, but it's been empty for a long time due to how incredibly haunted it actually is. Nobody can stand all of the insane activity happening in this home at any given time. It isn't just your average run-of-the-mill spirits or ghosts that haunt the home, and that kind of made sense to me because while they are almost always a nuisance to the people who can't see or otherwise communicate with them, they normally aren't dangerous, and most people aren't willing to give up their home and place to live because of a few mischievous spirits. No. This house is also said to have a demon in it that portrays itself as a little girl named Sallie, and that's how it draws people in. We'll see about that, and by the end of this, you're going to have to let me know in the comments what you all think. I'm really excited to cover this one and discuss it with you all, so let's just jump right in. The name Sallie House comes from a little girl who was said to have lived in the house sometime around when it was first built, who died there while undergoing surgery on her appendix. According to local legends and most of the information I was able to dig up, there's always been some sort of paranormal activity in the house, specifically from the time when young Sallie passed away. However, it seems like this activity got much more rampant and violent when a young couple named Deborah and Tony Pickman moved into the house in 1992. Though they lived there while Deborah was pregnant and then with their newborn baby, it seems as though it was Tony whom the demonic entity was most focused on. He eventually left the home after having dealt with numerous burns, scratches, bruises, and paranormal attacks of all kinds. Unexplained fires are also something that are allegedly quite common when people are living in this home, as well as objects moving from one place to another on their own, lights turning on and off by themselves, objects floating through the air without anyone else at all having touched them, pictures constantly being turned upside down, and the toys in the baby's nursery would be thrown around all the time, all around the nursery, even after someone would come in and clean it up. The Pickmans said that they would constantly hear strange noises, usually in the middle of the night, but sometimes at other times of the day as well, and it mainly would sound like someone was moving heavy furniture around in another part of the house. But when they would go and look, of course, nothing would be moved. Also, as I already said, they lived there alone with their infant, so there was no one else in the home that could have been making any of the noises or moving any of the furniture in the first place. There were also disembodied voices, scratching sounds coming from inside of the walls all over the house, cold spots, strange and oftentimes putrid smells randomly popping up all over the house as well, and the couple witnessed several different ghostly apparitions. I wanted to learn more about this so-called demonic presence, so I looked more into the home and the history of the property, and I found that there's a lot of evidence that someone who either once lived there, or possibly people who broke in during one of the homes many times when no one was living there, had conducted rituals to conjure and bring forth a demonic presence. These rituals seem to have specifically taken place in the basement. Many people who have been in the home say that rocks and bricks would be thrown violently at them until they would run away and leave that space. In addition to the little girl named Sallie and the demonic entity who dwell there, there are also a plethora of other spirits allegedly haunting this house. There is a young woman there who's believed to be Joanna Barnes, a relative of the doctor who performed the surgery that killed young Sallie. Joanna lived next door to the home at the time of the operation. The activity in this house is so bad that many of the paranormal investigative teams that have gone there to work and try to get to the bottom of things had to even leave before they even finished setting up their equipment. Also, I think this is something worth mentioning. Many skeptics who have visited the house have left this house full-blown believers. Now, this was all of the information I could easily find on this home and the things that go on inside of it, but that wasn't enough information for me. As most of y'all know, I needed more. I kept digging, and here's the rest of what I found. I wanted to cover the Pickman haunting specifically, and that's what I'm going to do going forward. So it's more about now this haunting as well as a little bit of the history of the home. But before we do that, let's take a look at the house itself and a little bit about Sallie as well. Most of the information contained here is from the site, The Paranormal Catalog. The Sally house, as it's come to be called, was built in the mid-1800s and was commissioned by the Finney family and served as the residence for Dr. Charles Finney. Dr. Finney used the lower floor of the home as his medical office, and he designated one room for examinations and surgeries. The Finney family lived on the upper floor of the home, but eventually they outgrew it as a family and decided to move to a bigger place. Now let's talk about Sally herself. Sally was a 3-year-old girl who was suffering from a severe stomachache, almost paralyzing her in its intensity, and her mother eventually brought her to Dr. Finney to be examined in his home. The doctor immediately diagnosed Sally as suffering from appendicitis and started the operation without waiting for the anesthesia to fully kick in on the little girl. It's said Sally screamed at the top of her lungs over and over again before dying on the operating table. Medical records were barely kept back then, if they were kept at all, and I couldn't find any actual evidence or documentary proof to back this up. But it's commonly accepted as what happened back then by most people who know anything at all about the Pickman case or the Sally house in general. I thought about this, and I feel like with this being a doctor's residence where he performs surgeries and all kinds of examinations, it's almost impossible that Sally would have been the only one to have ever died in this home. Think about how rudimentary, to put it politely, science and medicine were back in the early to mid 1800s. I really wish I can go to this home and speak to these spirits, and maybe one day I will, but until that day comes, I just think that maybe because she was so young and so scared and confused when she died, that's more than likely the reason Sally's spirit stayed behind. And I don't necessarily think that the spirit of Sally herself is a demon in disguise. I believe it's two separate entities who people are seeing as Sally, but take that with a grain of salt. That's only my opinion based on my research and where my intuition lies within this case. Now, let's talk a little bit about the Pickmans and their traumatic experience in the home. The initial account of the haunting of the Sally house was documented and brought to light by Deborah and Tony Pickman, who, as I said, moved into the home in 1992 on New Year's Eve going into 93. From outside, this house looks absolutely perfect. Its white brick with blue trimming and cute little porch present a charming, somewhat down-home image that I believe most families would be drawn to. The house has 2 floors and 3 bedrooms, and when they moved in, they converted one of those bedrooms into a nursery for their expected child. When they first moved in, nothing seemed amiss about the home, and the couple were very happy with their decision to move when and where they did. Gradually, however, things started to get weird. Light bulbs flickering and buzzing even when turned off, and the cordless phone intermittently losing and regaining power for no discernible reason were the first occurrences the family noticed. After living there for a while, though, they all but forgot about these experiences for the most part, and that's because they weren't happening that often, and they also didn't think much of it, except maybe it was just a little weird. However, with the birth of their son Taylor that June, things would become much more strange and a lot more terrifying in the home of Tony and Deborah Pickman. One night, after visiting with Tony's family, they came home to find something odd happening in the nursery. All of the stuffed animals that were in the nursery had been arranged in the middle of the floor on the room in a circle, with all of their hands touching and facing outwards into the room. So, middle of the room, they're all kind of holding hands, these stuffies, these stuffed animals and stuffed bears and stuff, and then they're facing outward of one another. They thought at first that Tony's sister-in-law had done this as a cute little surprise for them, and they weren't concerned about it at first. However, when they called her to ask about it, she was very confused, and honestly, she had no idea what they were talking about. She said that she hadn't been there since earlier in the week, and she'd only gone into the nursery to look at everything and admire it, and that she hadn't touched anything at all, let alone had she arranged the stuffed animals in such a way. So what I actually think happened is there were a few loose facts in these articles, because the way I remember it being told by the Pickmans themselves is that their family, so Deb's sister-in-law, Tony's sister, had been visiting them that day, and then once they left, that's when they saw this in the nursery, because it makes more sense. If the sister-in-law or the family had been visiting earlier in the week, she'd been in the nursery since then. She would have known if the stuffed animals were there on the floor. Anyway, while they were on the phone, she told them that when she'd been in the nursery, she'd had a somewhat strange experience herself, but that she hadn't mentioned it because she hadn't really thought much of it until that moment. The sister-in-law said that while she was in there, she felt an eerie draft, a strange, very cold breeze overtake her. She said she hadn't only felt it in the nursery, but several times all throughout the house, the whole time she'd stayed there with them. She said as well that one time when she was climbing the stairs, some unsettling feeling came over her as something frightening and unknown engulfed her and took her over. This feeling was so bad that she actually admitted to pulling out her gun in response to it. Tony and Deb hung up the phone and went to put the stuffed animals back where they'd originally been. They turned off the lights and went back downstairs. Once they got to the ground floor, they saw that the light in the nursery was on again, and so they went back into the nursery to see what was going on. They immediately saw that the stuffed animals were back on the floor, holding hands in the circular position they just fixed them from. There was no one else in the home, and there was no way this could have happened organically or naturally, as only seconds earlier they had put them all back on the shelves and in the crib and everywhere else where they belonged. None of them were in the middle of the floor. They searched all of the rooms in the house for an intruder, and this, in my opinion, just goes to show how confusing paranormal activity can be, especially on the minds of people who don't normally have experiences with it. Why in the world would someone break into their home, sneak around, and do all of that just to rearrange some stuffed animals in an infant's nursery? But they didn't know what else to think, I guess. They searched all of the bedrooms, every single room in the house, and even they went down in the basement. They found no one there and nothing that would or could explain the previous events that had just happened in that nursery. They once again fixed the stuffed animals and turned off the lights. They went back downstairs and waited to see if anything unusual would happen. They kind of were ready to move on and chalk it up to just another strange and seemingly random, mysterious happening in their dream home, but then, about a half hour later, Deborah went upstairs to use the bathroom, and much to her dismay, even if not so much to her surprise, she saw that not only was the nursery light on again, but there was a single teddy bear sitting in the middle of the floor, right where the circle of stuffies had been twice earlier that night. The couple were terrified and full of fear, so they immediately contacted Tony's brother, Larry. It's unclear why they chose Larry specifically to call at this moment in time, but he was able to put them in touch with a psychic who he said might be able to help them. So because of that, I assume he had a rudimentary knowledge of, or at least an interest in, the paranormal. The psychic, whose name was Barbara, went to the Pickmans' home and conducted her own psychic investigation. Barbara is the first person I've been able to find who mentioned the little girl Sally being in the home. She said that Sally died in the home, but that she meant the Pickmans and the baby no harm. Deb and Tony weren't convinced, and after Barbara left, they also left the home for the night so they could kind of decide what their next move would be and get a break from the entire ordeal. On the way out to the vehicle, after they packed everything they needed to leave for just that one night, Tony suddenly felt a sharp, searing pain all through his back. It came on out of nowhere, and there was literally no reason for it. Despite the physical pain he was in, the terror they both felt overwhelmed them, and instead of stopping to look and see what was going on with Tony's back, they instead drove away and left the home. Later on, when they finally got to where they were going, Tony lifted up his shirt and revealed to Deborah the cause of the intense and seemingly random pains. 3 long and deep scratch marks had appeared out of nowhere on Tony's back as he ran from the home in fear earlier that night, and right after the psychic Barbara told the couple about the ghost or apparition, Sally. The way I saw it described too was that Sally was very protective of the infant, and as they were fleeing the house in fear and terror for their lives, Tony is the one who picked up the car seat with the baby, who was screaming in it and was running out the house with the baby. So some people do think that she was in protective mode and that it wasn't the demonic presence but Sally who thought that he was hurting the baby because the baby was screaming. Babies can pick up on energy, so can children. They know when something's off. And that baby was probably just as scared, if not more, as the parents were, and they didn't even realize it. The Pickmans were far too fearful to live in the house anymore after that and decided to rent a different home until they could figure out what to do for the long haul. They didn't yet plan on leaving their home for good, but they just needed a plan going forward and didn't want to move back into the Sally house full time until they had one. What wasn't mentioned in the information I found online, but what I found out through listening to Deborah and Tony talk about their experiences firsthand, was that for a while they did eventually go back to the home and try to pick up where they left off, hoping that everything would settle down and they can get back to their normal existence soon enough. Deb felt very bad for the spirit of the little girl Sally, and for a while she did try to communicate with her. She brought her toys and all kinds of things for her to play with in an effort to make the spirit comfortable in the hopes she would no longer feel the need to lash out and cause all of the paranormal activity that was being blamed on her currently. Also, Deborah was hopeful the attacks on Tony would come to an end as well. One time, Deb said that she left a doll for Sally on a chair in one of the rooms and told her out loud that it was a gift just for her. When she returned to the room a little while later, the doll and all of the accessories that went with it had been taken out of the box, but surprisingly, the box itself had not been opened or damaged at all. While Deb was doing her best to pacify the spirit and bond with her, Tony wasn't having any of it, and he admittedly would argue with his wife about her efforts with the so-called little girl. Tony once saw the apparition of a little girl dressed in old-fashioned clothing, period clothing, in the kitchen, and Deb said it was almost like she was consumed by the spirit because the only thing she could think of when her husband, who was full of fear and no longer wanted to stay in the home after what he'd seen, was that she was upset and jealous that he had gotten to see the apparition of Sally and she hadn't. She said in her mind it was as though she couldn't understand why she'd been the one to have made all of the efforts with the spirit child, and yet the child chose to show herself to the non-believer who wanted nothing to do with her and essentially wanted to abandon her. The couple argued a lot at this time about Deborah's behavior toward the spirit because Tony thought messing with the unknown like that was bringing them more danger than anything else. He was also very skeptical, understandably so in my opinion, after being attacked the way he was, that this was in fact the spirit of a harmless little girl with nothing but harmless, if not a little mischievous, intentions. In 1994, the couple were still living in the home and trying to find help. In the 90s, there was no such thing as reality TV, and the ghost hunting and haunted house shows that exist now just were not a thing. People normally kept these types of experiences to themselves due to the judgment they would face in both their professional and personal lives. However, word had certainly gotten out about the strange events and the haunting at the Sally house, and it was in 1994 when a TV show called Sightings decided to do an investigation, and the crew visited the Sally house to conduct an investigation into the activity there involving the Pickmans. During Tony's interview, he was once again attacked, and while the people running the show and conducting the investigation stood there and not only watched but filmed for 9 straight minutes, Tony was scratched all over his stomach and back, with each set of scratches being in groups of 3 and very, very deep. We know by now that this is a sign of a demonic attack, but back then that information wasn't public, random knowledge. These scratches materialized before their eyes and without any cause at all. While telling their story, the Pickmans mentioned a lot of things that happened in the house that I didn't get to here. Little things that could make you think you're going crazy if you refuse to believe in the paranormal activity happening to you and right before your very eyes. One event stood out to me though, and that's when they said that one day they couldn't find the remote for their TV. However, this wasn't in the Sally house, but in the rental property they stayed on in the couple of months following the first attack on Tony and the visit from the psychic named Barbara. They searched literally everywhere, but they were never able to find it. That is until the next time they went to the Sally house and saw the TV remote from their rental sitting plain as day on their kitchen counter. Not only was there no way at all the remote could have gotten there, but it was covered in scorch marks and partially melted, and there was no explanation for that either. Moving on from the Pickmans, who moved out of that home and never looked back, some stories say they didn't even take all of their belongings, and others say they did, but at the end of the day, the paranormal activity in their home and in their lives ended once they left and cut ties with the house for once and for all. I want to talk about the Astonishing Legends team who went to the Sally house to investigate for their paranormal podcast. They used a DR6 recorder to try and pick up EVPs, and when they heard what they'd captured, they were shocked. All of the questions they'd asked have been answered, essentially, but with an unearthly and definitely inhuman growling sound. The sound was extremely aggressive and very, very angry. One of the podcast's hosts, whose name is Scott, was so terrified by what they picked up in that audio that he still says it was a big milestone in his paranormal journey. Before investigating inside of the Sally house, he was an absolute skeptic about anything and everything paranormal, but after visiting that location, he said he was made a firm and staunch believer, mainly due to the recordings they'd picked up on the DR6. There was simply nothing that could explain those aggressive and angry growls away. I also saw an episode of BuzzFeed Supernatural where Shane and Ryan investigated. They didn't get much by way of evidence. I mean, they never do. I love watching them though. And even though I dislike and very much disagree with their tactics, I do find them charming and hilarious and love that episode specifically, so if you want to check it out. Have you ever been to this location? If so, what was your experience? How about other haunted homes, other locations? What's the most haunted home or location in the area where you live? Let me know if you have a paranormal, supernatural, or extraterrestrial experience, something otherworldly perhaps, that you want to share from my listener encounter series. Please hit me up in the email provided in the description box and on screen here in a few moments. That's all I have for you today, guys. Please give this video a big thumbs up if you enjoyed the content, if you enjoyed hanging out with me. Spread the love by sharing this video. Please subscribe if you haven't already. We just hit 6K subscribers. I am so grateful and thankful and excited about that. Hit me up also on TikTok. I am steadily gaining traction over there with my short videos, YouTube shorts. It's important you support me on those as well. I'm also on Facebook and Instagram. I don't really understand it yet, but guys, if you're on any of those platforms, please hit me up. I really could use the support. Don't forget, I mentioned it in my TikToks. I mentioned it in some shorts across all my social media. I've been super excited to talk about it. Dubby Energy. Okay, I put out several shorts on this energy drink, and I'm currently in the process of filming an ad to place somewhere in the middle of my videos, or maybe in the beginning or the end. It's going to be somewhere in the video. It's going to be just a couple minutes long to explain more about Dubby's natural energy. I have all but switched to Dubby from the other energy drinks that I used to drink, the one specifically I used to drink all the time. You can get 10% off site-wide at Dubby Energy if you go to the link in the description box and in the pinned comment and use code GEMSTONES, all lowercase, GEMSTONES, GEMSTONES, all lowercase, for 10% off site-wide. Please, guys, support me. You guys are always saying that you want more ways to be able to support me besides just donating money to me. Well, here you go. Click that link. At least check out the site. If there's nothing there for you, that's fine. But it does mean a lot to me when I look and I see that people are actively engaging with my sponsors, because I hope to have a ton more coming soon. And Dubby is really exciting because don't think I haven't had offers for sponsors in the past 3 years. I have. It just has to be a product that I agree with and that I want to go to bat for. And Dubby is definitely that product. So please check out the pinned comment or the description box for those links. Go to Amazon and type in Gemma Jade books for all 14 of my 14 book collection. I write paranormal nonfiction, 6 of which are bestsellers. In the description box, you can find the links to the Kindle and paperback and Audible versions of those books, but I'm bound to miss it with that many links. So going to Amazon, typing in Gemma Jade books, you will see my whole collection. To send me your stories, extraterrestrial, supernatural, paranormal, otherworldly, personal stories for either one of my book series or my listener encounters show here on this channel, my listener encounters videos, either or, please email me at GemmaJadeParanormal@gmail.com. Also email me for if you want an autographed copy of any of the books. Do that before you make the purchase though. I'm losing my train of thought. Also, you guys have my email, GemmaJadeParanormal@gmail.com, if you want information about personal intuitive oracle readings, full birth chart readings, video readings, other products I sell, other services I offer. For any and all correspondence, I do not accept PMs, DMs, TikTok, or Facebook messages. It is just by way of email at GemmaJadeParanormal@gmail.com right now. Thanks for hanging around to the very end of this video. Be kind to each other, guys. It doesn't cost anything. Be kind to yourselves and never accept anything less than others being kind to you. If nobody told you today, you're amazing. You're wonderful. You are right where you need to be. And if nobody told you today, I believe in you and I got your back. Always go in grace, smile at a stranger, and I'll see you guys next time. Bye.